the truth. I started doing this a few months ago because my spirit guides told me that with the changes that were going on in the world, they really wanted me to be able to reach out to the peoples of the world and say, in spite of all the destruction that is going on, there is a tremendous amount of spiritual growth happening. As a result of the changes that are going on, we are looking at many different issues. Now, one of the issues that I've talked about before is the abortion issue. And I'm bringing up this book today to help you see pro-life, pro-choice, pro-spirit. Now, I published this book over 10 years ago. And the bottom line was that back then, in those days, people would say that it was evil to kill a baby. So this book actually teaches you why it isn't. Okay, but better to hear it from the horse's mouth, as it were. So I decided that I would speak up about what I've known throughout my life, and I have done videos on this before, but it's time to update things because, we do get out of time periods, and me being 81 years old, it has a lot of times gone by. So when I go back to the early periods of being pregnant and outside a family structure, then a woman was forced to find somebody who could do the abortion illegally. And I'm the first to admit that I went through that. Because back in those days, it was not the done thing for a lady to be pregnant, and also it was not the right thing to load your parents with a baby that they would have to support and so on. And so, yes, my boyfriend didn't want to marry me, and my mother knew all about it, and so I had to find someone who could help me. The ultimate thing was I helped myself. I knew my herbs, I knew the things I could take, and I knew what I could do to my body. And so I did lose that child. And I was very happy to lose that child for a very reason that nobody would understand today. My psychic skills were becoming numb while I was pregnant. I couldn't understand it. I thought, why don't I feel? Why don't I hear my spirit guides? And of course, when the time came that I lost that child, my psychic abilities came back. And I said, why did this happen to me? Why did I get pregnant in the first place? Because I was being very careful, etc., etc., etc. And of course, what they said was, well, you just allowed a spirit who is preparing for another life in the future to come into your body, see through your eyes, use your psychic senses, work amongst you and your people as you did your healing and so on, and in that process, see what needed to be done for that spirit entity who was going to come back in the future. I thought, wow, I never thought that that could be a possibility that why a woman would get pregnant. Well, let's fast forward a little bit more in my life that you'll read in my book that I was then raped by my friend's husband. Won't go into the boring stories, but he got me drunk. Yes, in those days I did like a nip or two, but no, I didn't like to get drunk. But he kept telling me, drown your sorrows, now your boyfriend's gone, and so on and so forth. And next thing I knew, he'd taken me home, and I woke up, and there he was. And of course, I screamed and yelled and did all the necessary. And the next thing I knew, I was not seeing my mother. So, what happens? Okay, Sister Teresa, where are you? Why aren't you talking to me? Again, I can't hear you. What's going on? I'm so worried. I'm so nervous, blah, blah, blah. Into my life came a new roommate, and she saw me miserable and she asked me what. And I told her my story, and she said, I can help you. And she went away and she came away with some drugs, and I was able to take those and to lose this second pregnancy. At that point, after it was all over, I said, Sister Teresa, where were you? And she said, inside you. And I said, well, why were you inside me? So she said, so I could get closer to you and be absolutely aware of all that you are in every sense of the word. Now, you have to remember, though, that I was young. I was 20, 21. And I was still, though, a psychic and had been since I was 2 years old in England during the war and after the war, and through the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain and all those kinds of things going on in my life. I was supposed to be the upright, purest person on the planet who is a medium. And here I had been caught being a naughty girl, in quotes. Well, 2 times, and now I learned that as the years went by, Sister Teresa stayed with me and counseled me through 2 bad marriages, helped me understand all the psychological and psychiatric work that I was studying, keeping all my nursing up to date that I'd studied, doing all the things that I normally would do to help someone in terms of therapies. And during that time, I'd always had my crystal therapies, as I called them when I was very young. We used to play mummies and daddies. I used to put stones all on my friends' bodies. Yes, stones off the ground. And those could be agate, they could be some quartz in them, in the agate, and so on. I didn't know much about stones. They were just pretty to me. And because they were pretty, I wanted to keep them. And when I held them, they made me feel good. So, of course, when I put them on my friends to play mothers and fathers when I was a child, I sat and watched their auras just go into these pearlesque colours. You've got to remember, children in 1942 onwards during that war were constantly bombarded by bombs every night. I, particularly living in London with my mother, and so one doesn't know just how much fear one has. And in that time, while I was literally growing up and evolving in my spiritual essence as an individual, I was dealing with war torn, post traumatic women and men who would come and ask me to sit on their laps. And of course, Daddy was there, so I'd sit on their laps, and they would go from these yucky blues and greens and colors into a pearlesque, golden, sort of purpley, pinky, mauvey, very pretty colors. And I would be so hot. And then once they got healing, I'd jump down and I could then run and play and do something else till someone else wanted me on their lap. So by the time I was 9, I decided I was going to be a nurse and went on to be a nurse and to go into psychiatric and psychology and all this kind of thing and to study it, sometimes on my own, because there wasn't much that was written about anything like that in those days. So guess where I learned it? Oneness, the powers that be. And yes, every time that I channeled whatever I was teaching, either to my patients or to a congregation at church or in an event such as a Mind Body Spirit event that we had in England in the 60s through 80s, I was very popular, very well known. And my messages were very accurate, and people loved to hear loved ones, how they were getting on in the spirit world, and all these kinds of things. So during that time, I also learned that when a baby doesn't want to stay in the womb, no matter what the mother does to try and keep it there because she wants a baby, that baby will not stay because the spirit entity that's bonded to that baby during the early pregnancies is only there to uplift the mother, to get her out of an emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual depressed mode. Because you see, back in those days, women believed that they had to get married, and if they do get married, a man would take care of them, and in return, she gave him a child, especially a son. Yes, women were second class citizens in those days. Even if you went to work, you got half the wages that the men got. Really unfair. Most of you today don't realize just how lucky you are that you get sometimes more money than the men get. Because you're clever, because you're smart, and because you know that you've studied well in college and in school. Well, for me, I had to do all that too, but no, I couldn't get into all the programs that you have today because they didn't exist. People didn't understand about pregnancy, about marriage, beyond it is an organization structured by a church that you believe in that and do exactly what you're supposed to do. No matter what your religion is, the man controls the roost and the woman produces the babies. Well, for me, I followed that. I got married twice, and yes, I went downhill with 2 marriages and 4 children. and did all the things that one needs to do. But during that time, I was still channeling the oneness all the time. And so I was learning more and more about the issues around women. Most of the women who come into embodiment during that time had come to be a support mechanism. That was in their coding, that was in their soul vibration, that was in their DNA, that was in their RNA, and that was ancestry. And so we copied. Oh, great grandma used to play the piano. You better start learning to play the piano. Oh, Auntie Sally, she used to knit booties for babies. You better learn how to crochet those right now. Yeah, so I had all these practical classes. And by the time I was an adult and a mother, oh, I made all my children's clothes. Yes, everyone was like, wow, how do you do that? Well, the bottom line is if you didn't know how, you'd have to go to Walmart or somewhere like that in those days, which didn't exist, but I'll say Woolworth, and buy some little panties and clothes for your kids, and hopefully that they get them a bit big so they grow into them later, so you wouldn't have to make any later. Well, today there's a market. Just throw them, toss them, don't worry about it. You'll always get some more made from China or some other country where the poor people are slogging away in some sweatshop to make those so that you can get them. And you don't even think twice about it. All you think about is, I have a baby. I want my baby dressed in the best clothes. And I want my baby to be the smartest one in the town. And I want my baby to go to university. And I want my baby to be the king of the castle. Your poor baby is set up before your baby has even arrived because you're imagining, you're thinking, I want to have this baby. And along comes time for pregnancy, and along comes time for you to get pregnant, and all of a sudden, oh, I've lost it. Why? Because that spirit was in your body to teach you, don't program me. I don't want to grow up to fit your world of your history from the 60s, in 1960s, and have a baby in the 80s and tell them, well, I couldn't get to university, so you're going. Okay. And I couldn't get that kind of money, so you're going. And you're a girl, so I want you to be really, really fast forwarding into the future to be prepared. Well, those seeds worked, but not necessarily in that generation, but in the children's generation that followed thereafter. So my children who are in their 60s and 50s today, they're bringing up their children with college and university. And so we can see the evolution. So I want you to understand that a lot of the women who were made to have babies in a time when it was illegal to have an abortion were suffering. They were depressed. They were beaten by their husbands. They were abused because there was nowhere to go. If they went to the church, the vicar or priest or whatever he was would tell them, you're a sinner if you get rid of this baby, and God will never love you, and you will be cast into the devil's hell, and you will burn in hell forever and thereafter. What a nervous state we were in. I want to be loved by God. I want to be a child of God. I want to be accepted as God. And yet, if I lose my baby, I've got something wrong. Even if I lost it naturally, somebody told me I did it wrong. Somebody told me I wasn't good enough. I wasn't ready for a baby. I wasn't supposed to be having a baby. Well, judgment. Judge not, lest you be judged, is what Jesus said. And in those years, there was a tremendous amount of judgment. But the years went by and the women got stronger and they wanted to say what they would feel and what they would think. And they wanted to share their skills. And they'd learned through World War II that while the men were fighting, they could go in the factories and the jobs and run the country. So when the men came back, it's like, we don't need you. But of course, the men slid back into position and the women slid back underneath. And we had happy families for a while because women were happy daddy was home. And daddy was happy because he had a good job to go to until there was another crunch. And in America, Vietnam, in other countries, other wars. And this has gone on throughout time. And yet, in spite of it, women fought for their freedom. We go back to the suffragettes, tied themselves to railings and said, we are women, we need to be treated as women, not as second-class citizens. And so here today, women, young women, are very free with their sexuality. In fact, men and women are very free with their sexuality, and it's okay as it should be. I have members in my family who are on the other side of the fence despite their body. I don't want to call them anything. I don't think we should call them anything. They're human beings who have their own ideas about their sexuality and what they want with their body and how they want to live their lives. Well, if we go back to the early 1900s when men were coming out and letting people know they're gay, what were the women doing? Secretly hiding in their bedrooms, pretending they're putting on dresses and having nice earrings to wear and so on. But really, there was something else going on in the bedroom. It was just that we kept it quiet. That's what they would say. Now, today, it's okay. We can talk about it, and everybody talks about it, and it's fine. But why is there still a commendum of, can't get that word out, a compendium of people mixed up, in other words, in various states of judgment from I'm female or I'm male to I've got to have this kind of clothing, I've got to be this particular force field of something to the world, I've got to be out there giving and telling everyone, I know the truth, listen to me, you're a sinner or you're an angel, and if you don't fit in somewhere between the two, well, don't worry about that. You'll find your way somehow, sometime. Never. Yes, there have been a lot of people who have been suicidal. I saw so many people jump into the canals, literally not jumping, but I just couldn't have saved them if I'd wanted to. There was no way to get anybody out of the canal because the walls are at least 15 feet high and sloping in like this, so you couldn't climb out once you're down. And then the water was freezing, especially in the winter, and it would take you all the way out to the ocean because those canals all join the ocean because Japan is full of islands. There's also an area in the bottom of several volcanoes, but particularly one that's very famous, and the Mount Fuji, and there's a what you call it, forest at the foot, and it's so thick that in the winter when all the leaves are gone, there is one psychologist who goes out there once every 2 years to find all the dead bodies of all the people who've gone out there to kill themselves because they don't want to live anymore, because they can't get the food, they can't get the job, they can't be loved, they got to do an arranged marriage, they don't want to marry someone who's, not very good, they don't want to be in the same family business. Revolution wasn't about for Japan when I went there in 1986. So they can't find a way to kill themselves. Men were abusing the women, making them pregnant. Yes, they would keep them, and yes, they would, pay for the child to go to school, whatever. But it was under the old Japanese laws of like being a concubine. For those of you who don't know what a concubine is, it's a kept woman. And back in the ancient Japanese times, one prince might have 100 concubines. It's a wonder they had that much time to visit at night, but apparently they did, and they had many children. But then again, they didn't have computers and they didn't have a fast paced life. Everything was get up in the morning when the sun rises, and everything was go to bed when the sun sets. We've moved away from that. We cannot compare that anymore. So why are we doing the same with emotions? Why are we saying all the time that the priest is right? That when a spirit comes into the body of a baby growing in the womb, that it is meant to be born. I've just told you two scenarios in my life and in other situations where a spirit does not have a purpose to be born. Sister Teresa did not want to be born in my body. She wanted to know my personality, my character, my every emotions, my every fear, my every anxiety, my every worry, my joy, my skills, my talents. And believe you me, I was so glad that she did that with me, even though it came in a nasty way by being raped. Because what it did for me was put me on a higher vibration of awareness of the oneness, which led me to write one day my book, which is now called Journey into an Unknown World, The Way to Oneness Revisited. It's a workbook. It was written on my lap before computers one Christmas in 1963 or 4 or 5, somewhere around that time. And it was published, a dry version, which was originally called in Germany Reisen, Banken, Welten. I can't even speak German, but it means Rise into an Unknown World. And I went on to use that name later for my copy because originally the first book was called The Oneness. So now I want you to realize that if I can channel all of that because I had a pregnancy and I had an earlier pregnancy with a spirit that ended up also revealing himself to me as Christopher, who was a helper in my counseling and integrating with many of the people who were suicidal during those years when I became a working medium in England. And of course, while I was doing all that, I was also studying up and keeping up with psychology and psychiatry, and I was also keeping up with the British Church of Association of Great Britain, and I was also still a Church of England, a Protestant. And so I had my standards, my rules that I liked to live by about sin and so on and so forth. I was clean, I didn't use anything other than doctor's medicines. And eventually, with stress and strain and anxiety and whatever else you could call, I had another experience I didn't ask for, my death experience. I was 35 and I'd started to shake, and yes, I had Parkinson's disease. Now you can see now I don't shake. But I was trembling, something terrible. And my doctor friends, I had lots of doctor friends because being a nurse and other things, and worked at hospitals because being a minister, I had to go to hospitals when people were trying to commit suicide and rescue them, or they're dying and be there to say goodbye and so on. So I was very busy and very stressed. I had 4 children who were all wayward, and I had a husband who was drinking and gambling and so on. And so you can imagine I was way down with too much. And my doctor friend said, "Here, take these little pills, they stop you shaking." So I took them for 2 or 3 weeks, and they work for a while and then they wear off. And I think, oh, I better take another one. Well, over a period of time, unknown to me, I took too many. And I was laying on my sofa and I realized then I was dying. And I said, okay, I'm dying, I don't care. I've had enough of all this negativity. And then Red Cloud, who was one of the people I channeled in public, and I'm sure Americans know who Red Cloud is. And he came into my body. He walked me to the phone and dialed a number I didn't know and spoke to my ex, who came and took me to a hospital. And everyone kept saying, "How many pills did you take?" Because I had lots of pills, aspirins and different things. And I kept saying 20, 20. And then I'd pass out. Well, they wrote me down as having 20 of about 10 or 15 different pills and didn't know about the one I'd had because I'd taken a couple in the kitchen and tried to make myself throw up when I realized that could be dangerous and didn't succeed. So I knew something was wrong. But I thought, well, I've just had too much. My depression was at its bottom. Well, while I was in the hospital, I literally died. Not from taking 20 of all the other pills, but from the pills that I was on, which I later found out from my doctor when he came to see me, that they were a new pill that was in a test motion, a derivative of heroin. Well, yes, I went through with heroin withdrawal after that. My will to walk and to get my body to work was in itself a lesson to appreciate how cellular neuromuscular memory makes me walk. From my baby self, my instinct self, I was walking, lifting my body like this to move it. I won't go into the whole story because it's in my book, My Journey into the Oneness, which you might like to read. You can get it online. But why I'm saying this, I want you to understand your body is programmed. And it is programmed to take in the child you will have and will carry to full term because you made a pattern, a promise to do that in the spiritual world. I learned all this by doing it the hard way. You don't need to. All you need to do is to take the pill and be sure you're safe until you're happily married and then you want to try for a baby. But maybe the baby doesn't happen right away because you're not ready to bring another spirit into your body. So, my last message here in this little free talk is to say to you, you have the freedom of your soul. The truth in you is you know when you're ready to bear a child. And when you are, it will happen. If you are not ready and you find you're pregnant, your choice to lose it is your choice because the spirit that is with you will not want to be born anyway. So there'll be a sense of this is right to do from your point of view, as indeed with the spirit of the person that's in you, if there is a person at all. Because the last thing I want you to hear is the spirit of your child to be does not take up residence until the quickening at the end of the first term of the pregnancy. So the spirit, i.e., Spirit Teresa was with me, was not in the body, she was in my body. So, on that note, I'd like to say to you, don't give in to religion and philosophy that's history and out of date. You're a modern person. You're a modern man and modern woman, and you can have a baby by adoption if you need one, because there are many babies right now who need to be adopted. So don't judge. Ask God. Ask the oneness. Bring me the time when I should be pregnant and let it be fulfilling. If I lose it, tell me the lessons I've learned and I will understand and use that to help other mothers who lose their babies. And in time, when the world understands the unity of man and woman as one being in harmony to share a life, then we, the people of the world, will look down on you because we'll be dead and say, well done, because you finally realize that the spirit controls life. That's it. Nothing else to say. Your spirit controls your body. Your spirit decides whether you want a baby or not. The spirit of the baby you promised to be will tell you at the last minute, I need to come in, and you'll change your mind and you'll have that baby. And you'll give it life, even if you give it away, because that's what you were supposed to do. But if you feel so strongly that this is not your time and you're not ready for it and you're not well and you're not strong and all those things, then go see your doctor and get the help you need. Because you're lucky. You do have help. I didn't. And on that note, thank you for listening to my show, The Truth. I want to give you the truth always. So please come again and listen to my other shows whenever you can. Be well, be happy, and enjoy your life because it's there for you to enjoy.